Let's give it up for Vinit Dhatrak with How to Crack Software Engineering Interviews at FAANG.
Test. Can you hear me? Okay. A little more? Good. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I. Give me 1 second. So how do I? Is the font okay? You can read it? Yep. You just. Yep. All right. Okay. So I wanted to talk a little bit about tech interview preparation and sharing my experience. My name is Vinit. I've been working as a backend software engineer for more than 15 years at this point. I'm an ex-Googler. I've interviewed with a bunch of companies. I took this as an opportunity to share my experience. Let me try and understand the audience a little bit. How many of you are like fresh graduates, computer science related, just entry level? Okay. How many of there are like early career professionals? Okay. How about senior folks, 5 to 10 years of experience? Okay. How about staff plus? Okay. That's quite a few of you. Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing, right? I know getting getting a job interview is a process that you have to go through. So let's try and understand what exactly takes to clear those interviews. Think of from the perspective of the interviewer, right? We want to help them to make the decision for you. Okay. So my objective is try and understand what rubrics that are there in front of the interviewer that they are judging you on. So let's try and reverse engineer this a little bit, right? There are a bunch of rounds, like there is coding rounds, then there is system design round, there's few behavioral rounds as part of the interview process. And let's try and understand what are the ways you can handle those interviews. I'll also be sharing some resources, and of course my experiences were interviewing with few companies, and I put together few tips if there are any help to you. Okay, make sense? Any questions? Okay, and yeah, please feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions. Let's keep it as an interactive session than me just talking. Sounds good? Okay. Yeah, let's get some reality check as well. I know everyone is going through a rough time. Tech hiring is tough right now. There are not many companies that are mass hiring, right? Of course, there is some roles open, but not like maybe 3 years ago or 4 years ago. The situation was quite different. It's very tough right now to get hired. There are a lot of layoffs. So the folks who are impacted are in market looking for the jobs. And the folks who are already working, they are also looking for maybe backup options. So there's a lot of competition in the market. So if you are applying for a role, there is very likely chance that a more qualified person is also applied to the same role. And there's a lot of competition, especially entry level. I mean, I feel bad who are graduating this year, this couple of years. Yeah, it's probably not the best time to graduate. Uh, yeah, and the other thing is, this is my personal opinion. Tech hiring isn't fair. I don't know how many of you would agree with that, but in my opinion, it's not. It's broken, to be honest. Uh, Tech interviews aren't perfect. There's a lot of luck associated with interview process. I want to say there are a lot of biases as well. Uh, some intentional, some unintentional biases that you have to go through. Uh, Hiring process is also not consistent. Many companies, at least the big companies, try to make it consistent so that they are judging all the candidates on a similar level. But if you look at mid-level companies or even startups, they don't have a process, or it's not consistent candidate by candidate, right? So yeah, do you guys agree? Like, yeah, make sense? Yeah, the yeah. So I think this is the situation right now. But I want to highlight that even in this situation, we can crack these interviews if we understand what to expect. Like what is the thing that the interviewer is expecting you to perform in that 5-6 rounds, right? So let's try and reverse engineer it, right? Let's try and understand what each round basically judging you on. Um, is this visible? I'm suspecting this is a little small, right? Yeah, I thought I put together this like last minute. I'll see if I can increase the font somehow. Anyways, I don't think I can increase the font, but I'll read it. So we we get what, and I'll be sharing this slide anyway at the end of the session. Uh, any questions so far? All okay? Yeah. Oh yeah. You might get lucky in some of the hard questions may not get asked to you. Somebody, interviewer who is who's preferring maybe not so tough questions end up being asked to you, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. It works in favors. Yep. Yeah. So for tech interviews, there are 3 rounds, right? There is coding interviews, then there is system design interviews, and then there are behavioral rounds. So let's try and understand each of those. Okay. So let's talk about coding rounds first. What exactly are they looking for in coding rounds? So I put down 4 points. Okay, so let's think from interviewer point, right? He's there. Somebody has asked them to conduct an interview for the company, right? They are not doing this for out of fun. I think their job is also tough. Try and understand this. And what they are looking for is they are trained to look for certain rubric qualities in you, and for them it's just check marks, right? Hey, the candidate has covered all the bases, and I'm okay for this candidate to get hired. So at the end of the day, for them, they have to fill out a document which is an assessment of that interview, that 1 hour interview, right? Now, first is how is your problem solving skills? Okay. Uh, in order to give that impression or give that signal to your interviewer that you are good at problem solving, you have to make sure that first of all the question that you get asked, you understand the question. Make sure that you ask clarifying question to the interviewer. Okay, here's a small tip. even if, let's say, you know the problem, even if you have solved this problem 10 times, just pretend to ask some clarifying question. Okay? It gives the interviewer a signal that you just directly jump to the solution. You tend to think. You have that quality to ask questions. Does that make sense? Okay. Explain, of course, you have to explain the algorithm before jumping into a code. Um, yeah. Um, explain the time and space complexity. Every algorithm, you have to explain the performance of the algorithm in a very precise things. Don't fumble there. That's your the best quality. Every algorithm you explain what is the complexities, time complexity, space complexity. Uh, in terms of that's about algorithm. You make sure that the data structure that you use are optimal. That they are not using excessive space. They are performant in certain operations. Uh, avoid unnecessary operation like assuming that the data is that is given to you is sorted. Don't do that. Yeah, don't make assumptions. Make sure that you even if you are making an assumption, even if it is a, obvious assumption, you state it explicitly. Okay, make sense? Okay, and yeah, yeah. Hmm. That's a tough one. Why? I mean, ideal would be you should know the complexities, and it's not that tough. Like this, just 4 or 5 ways you can have complexity. It's either linear, it's algorithmic, logarithmic, exponential, and quadratic. Just four, right? Yeah, yeah. Don't. Yeah. So okay. So here's the thing. If you say something that is incorrect, so yeah, avoid saying anything that is incorrect. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, yeah. So then once you and the interviewer agrees on a solution, this is very important. The interviewer has to agree with you that this is the solution that they are looking for. Okay, even don't jump to the code. Make sure that you confirm with the interviewer, hey, do you think this looks good? Can I proceed with coding? Till that time you shouldn't write anything. Okay, and once you agree, once you start the coding, of course you have to write the clean code. It has to have comments. It should be readable. Don't use variable names m, n, I, j, k. I mean, ij is fine if you are using it as index. It's okay, but make sure that it doesn't take extra few characters. Won't slow you down, trust me. Have variable names very clean, very it should have some purpose. And make sure that the this is the big thing, off by one error. You will be surprised how many times I've seen or I have made the mistake of off by one error. Your for loop has to start from 1 to n. It has to end at n. It doesn't. If you're off by one, that's a biggest red flag. You'll be rejected at that point. The interviewer has seen this solution probably hundreds of times before he asked you this question or they asked you this question. Uh, they exactly know where you are making the mistake. Okay, so if they notice that there is a off by one error, it doesn't matter how the rest of the interview is going, you'll probably be rejected. Uh, yeah, yeah. Applying to? Yes, yes. Out of the range, you're accessing array which is either before zero or after size of the array, or your loop doesn't even end. It's going in a, if it is a while loop, infinite loop kind of thing. Oh, yeah, yeah. Good point. Yeah. So you might have noticed, right, that coding interviews, they run on not on a platform where you can execute the code. It's literally a notepad kind of a situation, right? This is on purpose. They, they, they are not interested in your syntax. It's the logic that matters, the algorithm that matters. Uh, don't, if even if you make a syntax error, that's fine. I mean, probably the interviewer doesn't even know the language that you are writing the code in. That syntax errors are fine. Yep, yep. Any questions? Yeah. So this give the interviewer the second signal that your code is clean. You are able to write a clean code. The third point is, as soon as you finish writing the code, before declaring that, hey, I'm done coding, don't declare it. Now is the time that you proactively verify the code. And when I say verify, is dry run the code line by line. I can't stress this enough that a line by line verification is needed. Okay. Um, Take an example. Most likely the interviewer has already provided you a sample input and sample output. Take one of those examples and dry run them. Okay. Um, One thing I'll share as a tip is, if you are given an array, use those um, um, the symbols, the characters on your keyboard which point to up, right, to showcase the pointers. If it is a two-pointer method, right, and you want to show that, hey, I'm progressing this index by one, use that up cap lock button, right? I don't know. No, not shifted. Caret. Yep, 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 yep. Use that as a pointer, so that you can show that, hey, my low pointer is here, my high pointer is here. It's very clean to explain. Okay. Um, um, if time permits, especially if you are a senior engineer, come up with your own test cases. That's a bonus. That's really a good bonus. If they expect you to execute the code, write that in terms of, like, as if you are writing a unit test. It's a great signal for the interviewer that, hey, this person is not executing just for this example. He's writing a maintainable code. This is the way where your function will always be tested, and if something changes, the test case will be broken. Okay. And that's a bonus. Yeah. Any question about verification? Sounds good. Yeah. Oh, that's a bad situation to be in. Ideally, um, oh, sorry, I'll repeat the question. Yeah, yeah, please.
The question is that what if you run on the online IDE and, for example, you have to run 20 test case
Yeah.
and you only pass like 15
Mhm.
and you fail the last 5. So what would you handle the case that you try to figure out the last 5 test case to pass them on, or you just move on?
Yeah, great question. I think I have failed few interviews in situation. Um, Natural instinct says that we start debugging, right? We start putting debug lines where exactly it's failing. That's a wrong way. Um, I think at this point anyway, things are not looking good. Uh, what I would recommend is, check the logic, the code logic, and try to find logical error. Uh, you start this dry run is very important. As soon as you start doing dry run, you will be surprised that how many bugs that you will find in your own code once you start doing dry run. And that's the only way to fix it. If you start putting log lines and try to debug the code there, you are already on a wrong path. It's not going to end well. Yeah.
When you're doing a dry run verification and you do realize, oh, I've either forgot something or the logic is a little wrong, and you correct it, are you penalized for correcting?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. Especially a company like Meta, um, they expect in first attempt a cleanest code. If you end up asking for clues, hints, try to debug it there, it's most likely be considered as a negative. Oh yeah, that's a good point. If you catch it proactively, that's actually a good point. Yep, 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 yep. Yeah, and that's why I cannot stress enough on this one. This very important point that you find bugs in your own code proactively. Okay. And communication, of course, don't go silent. I've done that myself. I've seen candidate do that, and it's natural. I tend to freeze at least at the beginning of the interview, at least for 5-10 minutes. I just can't think. But yeah, they try to think out loud, whatever it is, no matter how brute force solution is. At least start talking. That'll give you some sense of relief. Yep, yep. Uh, yeah, make sure you clearly communicate the problem and solution. I think take pauses, don't worry. I think if you articulate it in a clean way that this problem is I'm taking an example, this is a quadratic solution, let me see if I can optimize it to a linear solution. If you start saying that, interviewer knows that what you are doing before you do that. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next one. I'm assuming no questions. Okay. The second type of questions are system design questions. This one is a little tougher one than the coding one. Um, so system design question, I'm sure you've interviewed with system design question. The questions are typically little vague, if you notice. It's just one liner, right? Design Netflix, or design Dropbox, or design tiny URL, whatever, right? And it's on purpose. Try and understand from the interviewer perspective what they are trying to judge you on. How do you navigate an ambiguous problem? That's the start of it. Okay. Um, if you're given a problem and if you're all over the place, you're trying to understand the problem at the same time trying to propose solution, trying to bunch of things. It needs to have a certain framework or some pattern to your answer. It shouldn't be a random whiteboard discussion, right? The, your answer should sound prepared. Okay. uh, I know it's not natural, but it's an interview setting, and that's what they are judging you on. So I would recommend at least have some flow in your solution. Give it like a 30-second or a minute to think once you are presented the problem, right? Design Netflix. I know that it's very tough to even scratch the surface for a system like Netflix in 40-minute interview. That's not the intent. The intent of the interview is how you navigate for those 40 minutes. How do you come up with various technical solutions, right? There's first second thing is if your interviewer is a good interviewer, he'll understand that there's no right or wrong solution for these questions. Anything that you present if you can justify with a technical reasoning behind it, should be a good solution. Okay. I tend to split the answers into these. I'm sure, yeah, this will help even interviewer not to zone out. So keep it interested in the solution. Try and get the requirements first. Even if, let's say, it sounds like, oh, design Netflix. I know what Netflix is. Let me start proposing the solution. No. Still try and ask them, hey, what exactly are you looking for? Because the interviewer might be interested in, he might be expert in database side of it, for example, right? He has a database background. He might be interested only in the database aspect of it. Or the interviewer um, might be interested in observability part of the design, right? Ask them, like, what exact part you want me to focus on. I'm happy to talk about anything, but I know and acknowledge that it's not possible to cover everything in 40 minutes. So ask them, like, what exactly you want me to focus on, right? And write them down as requirements, and of course split the requirements into functional, non-functional. Try and clearly separate what is the functional requirement, and solidify, like, this exact 4 things I want, for example, or 3 things I want from the system. And once you narrow down and agree on these are the requirements, what I tend to do is, for each of the requirement, I write the API for it. What exactly the input of the system should look like, and what should be the output of that API. Um, I can take an example. Let's say tiny URL, right? I'm sure you've used a system like tiny URL, where you provide a long URL and you get back a tiny URL version of it, right? But write it down, right? Saying is one thing, and clearly writing it down is a completely different thing. Because when you start writing it, I think you're kind of making a concrete proposal that this is what my system is going to take in as an input, and this is what I'm sending it as a response. I think, yeah. Any questions before we proceed? All right. Have you guys any like, how many of you have interviewed for system design rounds? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So now once we have clear requirements narrowed down, back of the envelope calculations are important because the systems are scalable systems, right? But you still want to understand what is it the scale that we are looking at. You'll be surprised that, for example, system like Netflix, your back of the envelope calculation is important because it's a planet scale system. Tiny URL, for example, may not even need so many resources, but the intention is to just showcase the interviewer that you can do these back of the envelope calculation. There's no way you can get to an accurate estimate. That's not the intention. The intention is that you can do the calculations. Does that make sense? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the question I have is, I used to do a long time ago. I'm 67. Long time ago, I was working as an engineer in construction, and the owner, who used to work in Honeywell, ran a huge company and large staff, but he started his own independent company, and he brought me into this his room, and he said, "I like you to do the control sequences for all the butane lighters," and the first factory that brought butane lighters into the United States from Japan, and certain things have to happen along the assembly line, and I said, "Well, how do I do that?" And he said, "With a relay." I go, "What the hell's a relay?" And so once he explained it's an on and off switch, which is exactly what are computers? Relays, right? And so I figured out all the things that could happen on that way, and I made the relays redundant and perfectly to the queue. When the Japanese manufacturer, they had factories and they had the relay designed back in Japan, and you know how Japan engineering is, right? Very good. They came over, they looked at my design, and they go, wow, that's pretty good. You have redundancy, less relays to break, less. How does that apply to code? In other words, you write code that's not lines and lines and lines, but very concise and does it. Does that carry any weight in the interview?
I hope I understood your question. So what you're trying to understand is, like, in an interview, you want to showcase your detail oriented and
Let's say you could write, this much code, or somebody else could write this much code.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, great question. So back of the envelope calculation is to calculate how many resources you are going to need, right? And in this case, resource could be money, like how much compute you need, how much CPU you need, how much memory you need, how much storage you need. So yeah, makes sense. All right, yeah. Once you have this back of the envelope calculations, go for a high level design. Make sure that you draw the boxes. I can show you a tool. Just give me a few minutes. Get familiar with the whiteboards, right? The online whiteboards. I know meetings are happening, like interviews are happening virtually now. Uh, I wish they were in person. In person, I feel whiteboard is much better, but get familiar with virtual, at least one of the virtual board softwares. I use Excalidraw. Good tool. So yeah. Coming to data models, make sure that whatever the database model that you are proposing, SQL, NoSQL, schemas, the relations, you clearly state the what are the primary keys, what are the foreign keys. The data model has to be solid and clear. It doesn't matter if it doesn't solve all the problems. It has to only solve the problems that were provided to you as a requirement in this interview. Okay, just this much, and of course, every here's the thing that I learned over the years. Every solution has their pros and cons. It there's nothing like a perfect solution. So wherever you propose a solution, immediately, proactively, explicitly tell them these are the pros and these are the cons, or these are uh, the downsides of using this. Okay, as soon as they because that's another signal, right? Interviewer wants to see you that you weigh in on all the options and this is the solution that you came up with. That's the signal that you want to provide. That's it. As soon as you do that and their checkbox gets ticked, they can move on to the next signal. Yeah.
A lot of people get jobs by starting a company and getting acquired by a company, right? I see a real huge opportunity in the twoest hottest things, Bitcoin, or blockchain, and AI. They're both using a whole lot of energy. You got blockchain doing needless calculations in order to contribute to the ledger. Why not have the AI calculations being done for the blockchain, parse it out, so now you use half the energy that you would be using before. The calculations are given cycles to the blockchain for the AI, and then, you know what I'm saying? So you're covering the energy bottleneck that's we're going to build, nuclear power plants for these damn things. So if somebody comes up with a way of cycling in the AI into the blockchain, we take care of that big huge problem. And that's I'm not going to work on that project. Whoever's open to that, I can talk to them about it.
All right, thank you.
I've had two experiences going in as a senior where I ended up at a physical whiteboard with the hiring manager, and we kind of had, high availability and load balancing, and I just started sketching out. I didn't actually have hands-on experience actually building any of that, but I knew the concepts, and he very much appreciated that would be in the back of my mind whenever I'm building anything, that I'm thinking about the scalability and the failover reliability and those things that the rest of his team doesn't want to have something thrust at them that doesn't work in that fashion. The other one, I got past the first coding interview somehow. Maybe it was an online thing or something, but I got to the second interview and it was system design. It was supposed to be half system design and half coding. We went overtime on the system design, so I kind of lucked out on the coding part. But at the senior level especially, be sure not to skimp on prepping for the cloud level, high availability, scalable, auto-scaling, load balancing, those kinds of things are going to be very important these days, especially as they're going to realize that when it comes to the coding, you're probably going to have AI do it anyway in a year from now.
Thank you. Thank you. And to add to that one more point, I mean, we haven't worked on all the components that we are going to talk about in the interview. For example, I've never seen a load balancer, how it's configured. I have no idea how the load balancer is implemented, for example, right? But you should still know how each component at a very high level works. For example, queues. I've never used queues practically, but I should know what the queue is, how the distributed nature of the queue works, what are the downsides, what are some of the offerings. It's okay if you don't know a specific software, for example, how Kafka works versus maybe RabbitMQ works. Nobody is interested in that, but you should know the concept, the queue concept, right?
I was reading an article on system design interview the other day, and it actually said you should avoid naming a specific brand or product like Kafka. Just say, I'm going to throw a distributed queue here. Because if you choose a product, you then have to defend why that and not the 12 other things you might have chosen.
That's a great point. Yeah.
So to piggyback off the previous gentleman's, answer. So how do we determine if the tools that we're using for the specific interview is, different from, let's say, the other competitors, the differences between cloud providers and the employer looking for specific technologies?
So that's what he's saying, right? You shouldn't name a product or a software. You should talk about the technology. So you won't get into that discussion, right? So you completely avoid that discussion where a specific software is discussed. You discuss the technology. Make sense?
But what if they ask you about the main differences between, or the small differences, but the main differences between, let's say,
Kafka and a good interviewer won't probably, anyways, but I don't know how to answer that one. Sorry.
I've actually been fortunate enough to interview at Microsoft, and I've had an interview at Amazon. Amazon occasionally actually has reached out multiple times. During the interview process, they actually stress, don't go to a code. Keep it flowcharty, keep it very universal. I've also been very fortunate enough from a cloud standpoint, going into your conversation, sorry not to add to it, but also been, the more things change, the more they stay the same. So it's just as a reminder of someone who's been there, it's keep it generic and be very talkative, because sometimes you'll mention something that no one else has mentioned, and they will actually give you, I don't want to say bonus points, but it becomes an interesting way down another rabbit hole. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so one other point I want to again highlight is you may not have worked on these systems, but you should definitely know the theoretical knowledge behind every technology. For example, uh, I worked at Box, Google almost like a planet scale storage, but I didn't work on the entire storage as a software. I was probably looking at one aspect of that entire huge planet scale system. But at least I know the end-to-end architecture. I I looked into various components at a abstract level so that I can talk about it. Okay. All right. Let me quickly, because I think we to prepare. Let me quickly get to the preparation part. I think that's more important. Coding question. How, like, now we know what the interviewer is looking for. Now, how do you prepare for it, right? You have some time and you want to prepare for coding, system design, behavioral. I have some suggestions. See if those work for you. For coding questions, lead code is a great resource. There are popular lead code questions. Try and solve them. Don't try to solve hard problems at all. Nobody asks them. Nobody's interested in you trying to struggle to solve a hard problem. Focus on just easy problems. And once you are very comfortable with easy problems, then slowly move on to the medium problems. Uh, Even in that, just focus on the popular problems. Those are popular for a reason. If there is popular blind 75 list, there are various lists. uh, they are curated because those cover a good problems. So yeah.
It just occurred to me, do the companies, obviously they know these lists, these suggestions, do they work around it, or do they don't care? That's exactly what they wanted. Is that what they want you to be prepared on?
So some companies have. I'll talk about it very briefly about that. Yeah. Let me finish this one. So once you have that popular questions and you start solving them, you will start realizing there are patterns to it. So all the coding problems probably can be bucketized into like 8, 9, 10-ish patterns. So you'll still start looking at the problem and identify that, hey, this problem probably can be solved with two-pointer method, or a linked list, or a tree, or this is a graph problem. You'll start visualizing these patterns. That's very important. What I do is I literally have a sheet of those popular blind 75 problems. I put them in a sheet. Okay. I pick one problem. If this is a brand new problem that I've never seen in the past, I just read the problem, understand the problem, literally look at the solution immediately and type it out. Okay. And try and submit it. I literally just copy paste the solution, submit it, understand the solution, how the most optimal solution is implemented, and put it in my review list. And exactly 1 week later, and I try to solve it myself by recalling what was there a solution a week ago. And if I do this couple of times, you will start realizing that you are now able to identify the patterns and solve similar problems. Does that make sense?
This is kind of going back to what you had discussed with the interviewer maybe not knowing the language they're even interviewing you in. Should you always attempt this technical interview in the language that you're applying for, or can you go to your bread and butter, best language you know, and apply that? Okay.
I would highly recommend, if whatever language you are most comfortable in, just I mean, there'll be language specific job specification, in that case, then you'll have to implement that. For example, I interviewed with NVIDIA, where they were exactly looking for C++. I had no choice but to interview in C++. But at least FAANGs, when they are hiring as a generalist engineer, they don't care which language you interview in. But yeah. Mhm. Thank you. Yeah, just quickly let me finish the system design because we are almost at the time. For system design, I know it's a harder. It's not. There's no fixed set of questions to prepare. It's the things are the endless data that is available for you to read. I tend to use these resources. I've used benefited from these. I'll highly recommend this book, Designing Data Intensive Application. It's a little lengthy book. It's boring. It's not interview specific preparation book, but it's a really good resource in trying to understand distributed systems, scales. I at least I'll recommend at least first 4 chapters. Read about read these 4 chapters to get your fundamentals clear. Uh, there's a bunch of other online resources which are interview specific. There's knowledge and then there is interview thing. So there is Hello Interview, there's System Design Primer. Many of the companies have their blogs, videos posted on how their technical architecture look like. If you have time, I'll highly recommend watching those videos. Especially Netflix has a really good video series going on. Uh, yeah, and for system design, the biggest, like the most important tip that I can provide you is take as many mocks as you want. Like take mocks as much as possible. There are platforms where you can get free interviews. You interview someone, they'll interview you. It gives you a practice, and it gives you a practice to time box your answers. Uh, yeah, it tests out your framework. You learn by looking at how others are interviewed. Okay, this is the biggest thing that helped me in clearing, like preparing for system design. Yeah, get comfortable with online whiteboards like Excalidraw. There are yeah. I want to quickly talk about my experiences. If you are interested, I don't know. You guys okay with? Yeah. Okay. So I did interview with almost all FAANG companies. I got offers from almost every one of them except Meta. But yeah, I'll share my experience. Uh, you'll have your own experience, but maybe something to learn from. For Meta, to answer your question, it's super predictable interviews. They in fact have very popular questions. If you go on lead code, sort by meta tag questions and look at top maybe 100 questions, let's even 60 questions. If you do 2 questions every day within a month, you'll most likely be clearing the Meta's coding interviews. Okay, super predictable. I mean, of course, there is a luck factor if you get asked any question that is outside of it. I mean, yeah. And they'll ask 2 questions. That's the thing for Meta interviews. They are not looking for how you think and everything. They just want the final answer, clean code, and speed. They're looking for speed. So they'll ask, your 40-minute interview will be split into 20-20. In 20 minutes, you are supposed to solve one medium or easy question. Okay. As soon as you get to that speed, you probably are ready for Meta interviews. For system design, yeah, mock. Do practice. Reach out to folks, mentors, or even colleagues. Yeah. Behavioral, I think the more the senior you are, behavioral interviews are more important. for entry level, senior engineer, I think coding is more important. Mid-level system design probably is more important. And for more senior folks like maybe directors and all those things, I think behavioral interviews are more important. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't. Give me one. Yeah, yeah. Google. My experience with Google, and I did end up joining Google. Um, they they are their take is probably opposite of Meta's take. They actually, if a question becomes popular, they put it in a ban list. You'll most likely not see a known problem in an interview. Coding, I'm talking about coding. Um, what I Okay, here's my observation. Take it with a pinch of salt. These are usually real life scenarios. You're taking a flight from somewhere to somewhere. It they'll 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 model the interview question as a real life scenario. It's your job to map it to correct data structures and algorithms. That's the Google style, and it's not a general thing. This is my observation. All the coding questions that were asked to me were like this. Okay, most likely graph problems. They Google somehow loves graph problems. Uh, yeah, system design. Talk about scale. Their behavioral rounds are called googliness, but it's just another name for their behavioral rounds. Okay. I know there's just 1 minute left, but yeah. Amazon, the only distinguishing factor from other two is Amazon heavily relies on their leadership principles. Every interview, whether it's coding, system design, they'll have one behavioral question in the just before the interview. So be ready for those. Okay. Uh, Apple, Netflix, Microsoft. What I've struggled with Netflix getting an interview call is they need a strong referral. Unless you have somebody within the company who is going to talk good things about you, interview getting an interview at Netflix. At least I found it very difficult. Um, Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia are hiring team specific. So you can actually interview with multiple teams at the same time. And even if you fail in one of the interviews, you can immediately apply to another teams. So they don't hire across the company. Okay. Uh, and yeah, what I noticed was sometimes some of the interview rounds have language specific rounds. For example, I told you, right, Nvidia wanted me to interview on C++. Um, yeah, there's no block period even if you fail one of the interviews. Yeah, Meta, I think 1 year, Google, I think around that time. But it's again case by case. Yeah. Yeah, some tips. Understand this is a numbers game. Throw a wider net. Don't get fixated on certain companies. Consider stepping stone roles. I know the market is bad, so probably um, throwing a wider note would have better chance for you to land somewhere. Um, and yeah, so I want to highlight on discouraging on rejection. I know rejection is very hard. Uh, I, I mean, at least for me, next 2-3 days are horrible. Uh, but what I've learned is it's not you, it's the market right now. I 3-4 years ago I had like 5-6 offers in my hand before I joined Google. Things are different now. And politely ask for feedback. Many recruiters won't share feedback, but see if they can provide any feedback. That's an opportunity for you to maybe improve a little bit. But yeah, one thing I do just before the interview is take just a walk to clear your mind. I know people tend to get nervous. I completely freeze, but taking a walk just before the interview really helps me. I do some breathing exercises as well. I don't know if you are into that, but yeah, that really helped me. Uh, yeah, behavioral. I quickly want to talk about behavioral. These are the signals that they are looking for. How do you handle resolving conflicts, how you are prioritizing your ambiguity. So this one, I'll quickly share a tip. So you read about it later on. What I do is I maintain a sheet, Google Sheet, where I have 4 columns, which has star in it. It's like STAR. And from my career, I have like 5 to 6 examples. I put them into situation, tasks, actions, and results. And of course, am using ChatGPT to polish it. And in an interview, if it is a virtual interview, I let interviewer know that, hey, once they ask you a question, right? Hey, I'm going to refer to my notes, and I read it from there. Okay, honestly, you'll feel a difference. Your answer sounds very polished after that because you are literally reading from a polished answer. I know it's not a very interview way, but that's what it is. What else? What else? Yeah, yeah. It's better, right? I mean,
They're asking for example from your past.
yes. So yeah. That's I didn't find anyone objecting, so I wanted to share with you that yeah. Okay. All right. I have the QR code if you want. I'll be sending the presentation. Any question last minute? Is this our time for question answers, or do we know? We are already on. Okay. Yeah.
All right, let's give it up for Vinit Dhatrak.
Thank you.
A couple of takeaways. I got logic over syntax. That was really cool. There is no perfect solution. Show the pros and cons. And even if you think you know, don't jump to solve the problem.
Yes.
Understand it first.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. And even if you understand the problem, pretend you don't understand it.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Play dumb a little.
Play down. Play the game. I'm telling you, you just have to play the game for 40 minutes. That's it.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, everyone.